Hey guys, my name's Heyman and I'm going to do a bit of a DIY today on how to change your front shock absorbers on the 90 Series Prado. There's a couple of reasons that I'm going to be changing mine. The first reason is that it's actually fitted with a 2-inch lift and Bilstein shock absorbers. The lift itself's probably sagged about 1 inch from 2, so it's back down to 1. And the Bilsteins, they're a bit of a soft shock absorber from the factory. You can revalve them, but it was probably going to cost about the same as replacing the shocks. So I've gone with a heavy duty spring, 2-inch lift, and I've replacing them with the Ironman Foam Cell Pro shock absorbers, which are fully adjustable and rebuildable. The other reason I was replacing them was because my lower bush on the front strut is absolutely gone. It's shattered, gone, disappeared. So I've already replaced them once before. I don't really want to do it again. And the third reason is because I want to put a steel bar and winch on the front. As you can see, it's now got the aluminium bar, so that extra weight on those Bilsteins, it's just going to sag even further. So yeah, I thought I'd do a video for you guys and show you how it's done. Cheers. So the first thing you're going to want to do is get your car up the air off the ground. In this case I've got a hoist, I'm pretty lucky, but most of you guys are probably going to be using a jack and jack stands. Make sure you use your jack stands. I usually put jack stands under the car. I keep the jack under there as well. I even put my wheels underneath the chassis, so if something does happen, it's going to hit the wheel first. It's not going to completely crush you and kill you. That's the last thing you want to do. So you get the car up off the ground. You've got to have all the weight off the front wheels before you can try and take any of the shock absorber stuff off. So what we're looking at here is my front lower bush in my strut. You can see there that there's a heap of play. That's pretty bad. Like I said, this is the second time I've replaced these bushes. I probably should have used genuine bushes instead of the cheap eBay rubbish, but that's just what you get. So the new shock absorbers have obviously got the new bush in the bottom, so that's going to fix one of my issues. Alright guys, so the first thing you're going to want to do is, if you've got a rattle gun, grab that, and a spanner. If not, use a breaker bar or a ratchet, 19mm socket and a 19mm spanner, and loosen that bottom bolt. Might need to grab your pry bar in there or a screwdriver so you can get this bolt right out. This one's been a bit difficult because the bush is so flogged out. There we go, that's out. So the next thing you're going to want to do is undo these nuts up here. So they look like a They look like a 14mm, which they are. You want to crack them with a spanner or a ratchet, whatever you've got handy. There's not too much room on this back one, so you might need to use a spanner for that. And you're just basically going to take all 3 of those off. If you've got a ratchet spanner, it'll probably come in handy. If not, it might take you a bit longer using an open-ended spanner. Alright, so I've almost got the last nut off there. So once you get that off, just grab your shock absorber down the bottom there so it doesn't fall out. And you should be able to wriggle the bottom out and pull it out just like that. So you got yourself a full strut there, complete with the spring, your strut top, it's all intact, ready to go. So we've got our complete strut out with the spring all ready to go there, guys. Just a bit of a comparison with this Ironman Foam Cell Pro is the make of it, and King Springs. It's actually a lot heavier than this Bilstein. They're both pretty heavy, but I reckon, yeah, these new Ironmans are much heavier. I don't know if you can see there. They've got a really thick shaft on the strut. They're rebuildable and they're adjustable at the bottom here. So I've already assembled these with brand new strut tops, brand new springs, and the shock itself. But I do need to adjust the height here. Now the guy at Ironman told me that it was 165mm from just here. I don't know if you can see that. From this little V here down to the bottom of the eye here. So I'm going to go ahead and chuck them in the vise and adjust these up the shaft to get the right spring height. Should note also, guys, I've put some copper grease on the threads and in between this seat and the top adjuster nut there. This is just to help when you adjust the spring up the shaft that it won't get any crap in the thread and it won't get stuck. It's going to make life a lot easier for you if it's got a bit of copper grease in there to help lube up that thread. It basically just stops it seizing on there. Unfortunately, Ironman didn't have any adjusting tools, so basically what I've got is a couple of punches here, and I'm just going to wind this. Takes a bit of effort, it's probably going to take a while, but I'm going to wind it up the shaft until it gets the height that I want it at. You can probably buy a tool for this. I would say a lot of Japanese performance places that replace coilover shock absorbers, they would definitely work on this. But I don't have one and I didn't have time to get one today, so we're just going to do it with a couple of punches. Alright, so as you can see, I've adjusted this adjusting nut up the shock, and I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but that's about 165 from the little V here down to the bottom of the eyelet. You've also got this lock nut here, which you can just use basically a punch and a hammer to lock that up, but I'm not going to lock it up yet because I want to get the car down on the ground, and I'm probably going to have to readjust it again before the car goes out the door. Another cool little feature that I didn't mention before on these shocks, guys, is that this eyelet here has got 360-degree welds. These Bilsteins have only got about 2 90-degree welds on them, so 180 all up. But this is actually welded all the way around the eyelet, so it's going to make a much stronger shock. The other good thing about them is, as I said, they're adjustable here, down at the nut here, but that's never going to change the complete length of your strut here. So that is about 520mm. That's never going to change. It can't, the shock actually won't allow it to go further than that. So you're never going to have trouble putting these in your car like if you put in a spacer or something like that, and it's really hard work trying to get it in there. But you can still adjust the spring seat to put more pressure on that spring to bring your car up higher. So you're not going to have a pain in the ass trying to get it in and out of the car. That's always going to be easy. You can adjust it in the car to raise your height up if you're adding things like winches, steel bull bars, any other accessories, or if it just sags over time, you can jack that up. And there's actually about another 110mm worth of thread there. So if your car sags, you've got heaps and heaps of room to play with to get it back up to the right height to where you want it. Alright, so some of you guys might not actually be replacing everything like me. So like I said, I've got a whole strut, a new spring and new strut tops. You guys might just want to replace your springs or just your shock absorber or whatever it is that you are replacing there. So you're probably not going to have a whole assembly like I am. Basically, it's the same principle to get it in and out of the car. You want to get it all out in one piece. You can throw your whole shock into a vise if you've got access to a vise. Makes it a lot easier. So basically, if you're just replacing, say your shock absorber's completely fogged out, but you've still got a 2-inch lifted spring in there, and you want to keep your spring, you can probably still reuse the strut top. They're a pretty solid item. They probably don't need to be replaced ever, really. Basically what you want to do is get yourself a set of spring compressors, which I don't actually have at the moment, but you can get them from super cheap, Repco, Autobarn, all those kinds of auto shops. And they're basically a big screw with hooks on either end of them. So they're going to hook onto your spring at the top and the bottom, and you're going to wind that big screw right through. So you've got one on this side, one on this side. I don't actually like using them. I reckon they're pretty dangerous, so you've got to really make sure that they're hooked on there properly. Otherwise, there's a lot of tension on that spring, and if it slips off, you can really hurt yourself. So you've got to make sure they're on there properly. Probably buy some good quality ones if you can find them. And basically what you want to do is compress this whole spring so that it's loose on the shock absorber. So the shock absorber will be sitting there, and you should be able to wiggle that spring around, and it shouldn't be touching on the top or the bottom. After that, what you're going to want to do is get your rattle gun. It's probably the easiest thing to do is a rattle gun. If you're using a ratchet, it can be a bit hard. But you need to undo this top nut here. Once that top nut's off, you can remove your strut top, remove your spring, keep the spring in your spring compressor, throw away your shock absorber, put your new shock absorber in there, spring back on, strut top back on, tighten up your top nut with your rattle gun, and then you've got your whole new assembly ready to go back into the vehicle. Another thing I didn't notice before was that my Bilsteins don't actually have a rubber in between the bottom of the shock and the spring there. I guess it's not really necessary, but not so much on a four-wheel drive anyway, but on a lighter vehicle, like if you had a Corolla or a Camry or anything like that, that's possibly going to cause noises and squeaking as you go around corners and over bumps. In a big four-wheel drive, not so much. But these new Ironmans actually came with a nice rubber mount in there. So you got the rubber mount at the top and one at the bottom. So hopefully this is going to be a nice quiet ride. One other thing, if you are assembling your own, guys, you have actually got 2 rubber bushes, top and bottom, from this this strut top, and a couple of washers to hold them in place. So you've got to make sure they're in place as well. Otherwise you're going to have all sorts of noises, rattles, bumps, squeaks, stuff like that. So basically they just keep that strut top in place and nice and quiet. Right, so guys, you got your new strut here. This strut top actually came with some brand new nuts, so I'm going to use them today. But if your other nuts are in good condition, you can always use them as well. So basically you're just going to do the opposite of what you did to pull it out. line those holes up at the top there, screw your nuts on top. Once those nuts are on, they'll take the weight of the strut so you don't have to hold it the whole time. Alright guys, so when I put this strut top in, the bottom eyelet wasn't lined up. It was actually 90 degrees to where it should have been, so I just grabbed a screwdriver or a punch or something, put it in that eyelet and turn it until it's going to line up. Then you'll be able to slot it in there and get the bottom bolt in. And then, yeah, basically just tighten up your bottom bolt using a rattle gun or a ratchet. Make sure your top bolts are tight, and then we can get it down on the ground with the wheels on and check the height basically. I measured the height before I started, so I'll give you those numbers when I check the height now. Another little tip is, if you actually leave your key in the ignition, your steering lock's not going to come on. So you will be able to turn your wheel back and forth and it won't be in the way. So if you remember to do that before you start, it makes life a bit easier as well. Otherwise, if it's up on the hoist, you've got to bring it down, stick the key in, and it just makes things a bit easier. When you're tightening up these top nuts, I just do them up by hand. I don't put any Loctite or anything on them. They are a locking nut, so they will lock in place. But if you're worried about them coming loose, by all means you can put some Loctite on there. Just remember, it's going to be bloody tight next time you try and get them off. I've never put Loctite on them, and I've never had one come undone on me, but that's completely up to you. It's not necessary, but for a bit of peace of mind you can put that on there. Same with the bottom nut as well. So my bottom bolt doesn't actually want to go in there, so I'm just going to grab a steel bar or a pry bar to pry that lower control arm down so I can put this bolt through. Alright guys, that took a bit of effort to get in, a little bit of swearing as well, but that's alright. So yeah, basically it was really hard to get that bottom nut in with one person, so if you've got a mate helping you, it makes it a bit easier. I also had to disconnect my lower sway bar link on this side, so I'll have to reconnect that as well. Basically when you disconnect your sway bar link, it's just going to let your lower control arm drop down a little bit more. So yeah, once I get the other side in, I'll get it down on the ground and show you guys how it's. Alrighty guys, so I got my wheels back on, I've tightened everything up. Just as a side note, if you guys do need to take off your link pins or your sway bar, you only need to take off one side. You might not have to do it. In my case, I did, but if you're replacing, say, a standard size shock absorber, you probably won't have to do that. It's just to get a little bit more play out of that lower control arm, get it a bit lower. So I'm going to measure from the bottom of my rim, which is a 16-inch rim, to the bottom of my guard here, and that is 760 millimeters. Now, with my old shock absorbers in there, it was sitting about 770 millimeters. So basically I've got to put the car back up in the air, take the wheels off and adjust those shocks in the car. So a bit of a stuff around. If you're just putting in, say, a normal set of shocks that aren't adjustable, you won't have to bother doing this. In this case I've opted for the ones that are adjustable, so I thought this was going to happen, so that's fine. I'll jack it back up and show you guys how to adjust them in the vehicle. Alright guys, so I've got the wheel back off. You can see my adjusting nut here. The locking nut is loose, so you don't need to worry about that one. Basically I need to get probably another 20 mils lift out of this strut. So if you adjust 10 mil on the adjusting nut, it's going to give you 20 mil of lift on the vehicle. Because it's actually set on your lower control arm, the more pressure you put downwards on the middle of the lower control arm, the more lift you're going to get out here at the wheel. So 10 mil in here is actually 20 mil out here. So yeah, I've got my high-tech tools, and I'm just going to turn that, and it is pretty stiff and it's going to take a while, but basically I need to get an extra 10 mil out of that locking nut. So I'll make a measurement now. From the top of that locking nut to the bottom of the thread is about 50 mil, so I need to get that up to 60 mil, and I should have 20 mil lift at the wheels. So it's going to take a while, bear with me. This is where putting that grease on the threads really comes into play. It's going to make this a whole lot easier. You've actually got a whole lot of pressure on the spring pushing down on this seat, which is pushing down on your adjusting nut. So yeah, there's a lot of pressure there. So the grease in between the two really helps lubricate that, and it's going to make the job a whole lot easier. It's pretty bloody tough as it is anyway, so just do a quick check as you go with your tape measure. That's now sitting at about 55 mil, so I've got another 5 mil to go. As I said, it does take a bit of time. If you're putting non-adjustable struts in, you obviously don't have to do this, but yeah. Alright, so that's sitting about 60 mil now. So I'm going to go ahead and lock up this locking nut on the bottom. Screw it right up so it's flush. I'm just going to grab a hammer with my punch. Give that a few good taps. You don't need to go overboard with that. You can check it again, maybe drive it for a few days and double check it, but you don't want to over tighten it because you're probably going to want to get it undone one day. So the tighter it is, the harder it's going to get off later. I might need to adjust these anyway when I put my steel bar on. I might want a little bit more lift because it'll have a bit more weight there pulling the front end down. I may need to lift it back up again. So I'll get the other side all adjusted, get it on the ground and recheck my measurements. Alright guys, so I'll measure that again after it's been adjusted. And that is sitting at about just under 780. I'd say 778. And the other side is the same, 778. Now, it's really a pain in the ass adjusting those shocks without a tool. So I think next time if I need to adjust them, I'll go get a tool. Got a bit of blood there, slipping off because I'm not using the right tool for the right job. But yeah, I'll definitely go and try and get a coilover strut tool from somewhere. It's going to make life a hell of a lot easier. But for the purpose of doing it today, using a screwdriver or some punches works. It just makes it a bit harder. So I'm pretty happy with where it's sitting at the moment. When the bar goes on and the winch, it's probably going to sag it down a little bit more, and then over time, maybe 6 months to a year's time, it's going to sag a bit more. But like I said, there's about 110 mil worth of play in the bottom of the thread of those shocks, so you can adjust it up as you need to or as it sags. Time wise today, it probably took me about 1 hour to assemble those struts, and probably an hour per side, so an hour per strut to fit, so about 3 hours all up, only because I had to adjust them. If you guys are if you've got a strut complete with a spring and the strut top on it all ready to go, you should be able to jack it up, pull the old ones out, put the new ones in about an hour. Just adjusting the heights and things, that's the bit that takes time. Not having the right tool to adjust the struts, that takes a bit of time. So yeah, you know, if you've got everything there ready to go, about an hour to 2 hours. This is already a hell of a lot harder than my Bilsteins ever were. So I guess I'll have to take it for a drive to see what it's like. But right now I've got some more work to do on it. I'm going to check out the calipers. I think one of those is seized. It's actually pulling to the left pretty hard when I brake. So I'm going to check those calipers out. And I've got an exhaust system to put on as well. So I'll probably make some videos on that separate to this. And I hope you guys enjoyed watching. And in those other videos I'll probably let you know how these front struts perform. I do have the rear struts on back order. They didn't have them in stock. So when I get the rear struts, I'll do a video on how to replace those and the springs as well. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I hope this might help someone else out who needs to replace their front struts. Cheers guys.